Liberty and Tom and Sarah as respondents. Before we get there, we also have kind of some really kind of interesting other kind of research and personal kind of personal encounters with space geography and history in the form of Adam Darcy's study of and visits to the Napoleonic sites. So Adam will be kind of starting us off this afternoon straight away, and he'll be followed by Laura Hurley and James Pearce, who've been looking at a Pavilion project in Blackrock Observatory in Cork. So I'm really excited to hear both Adam's presentation. It sounds fascinating. I do have an admission. I did doctor Adam's photograph that he did supply me to make him luminous green. I thought that kind of the green jersey was significant to Adam. So I enhanced that given the significance of that in the Tour de France.
Right, yeah, okay.
Napoleonic France. So
I noticed that, yeah, thanks.
You have to forgive me for that. And looking forward to then Laura and James speaking afterwards. So Adam, whenever you're ready, you can kind of take over the presentation.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Jason. Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Darcy. I'm an architect working in private practice here in Cork, and I also teach in the Cork, the college, CCAE, Cork College of Architecture and Education here in Cork. So when Jason put out a call for presentations for the series, I thought people might be interested to hear about my own personal project, discovering the historical routes of Napoleon's campaigns by bike. I'll share the screen here. Just a kind of a brief description about Napoleon. As most of you know, Napoleon was born in Corsica in the Mediterranean in 1769 and grew up speaking Italian, actually. A lot of people don't know that. He was sent to school in France at the age of 10, and he spent a lot of time in France in his education. He eventually qualified as an artillery officer, and being very ambitious, rose to power, eventually crowning himself Emperor of Europe, well, Emperor of France and most of Europe. He managed to seize power throughout most of Europe until his ultimate defeat at Waterloo in 1815, from where he was banished to St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he died in 1822. And actually, the 1822 is 2 years away, so there's going to be a lot of commemorations and everything to do with that. I've long held a fascination with his story, his life, his military career, and I've read extensively about him. But this book by Martin Boycott Brown came out in 2001, and it's called The Road to Rivoli, Napoleon's First Campaign. And as the title says, it was his first military campaign. And this put me on my journey. The text traces the route taken by Napoleon and his army during the campaign in northern Italy in 1796. And the actual campaign went on to 1797. Oops, sorry. So, you know, having read the book, it got me thinking, and because I was such interested in cycling, I love cycling, I got the idea that the route would lend itself to an enjoyable, challenging cycle tour, combining both of my keen interests in history and cycling, and to follow in Napoleon's footsteps, if you like. So, and you might ask, why would you cycle the route? But for anyone who's tried it, I think you'll agree that it's a great way to experience a country, a great way to see the landscape, the nature, towns and villages. You meet people, and you really get to know a country and a landscape. So I set off, and I didn't realize at the time, but it would be the start of a whole series of journeys that would take me right up to 2015. So this was in 2001. And, you know, it's all set out. It's all set out. You know, it was fairly relentless, the Napoleon and his military campaigns, because he ended up fighting with everyone. But this is kind of a list of the campaigns, the countries involved, the cities where I started and finished my trips, and the year in which I did them. And I started off in 2002, but by 2005 I was actually coinciding with the 200th anniversary of the events. So I tried to do this in the year of the 200th anniversary, if you like. So this is the first Italian campaign, and this red line here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the red line here, this is Genoa, and this is Verona. So that's more or less the route that I took back in 2002. So I flew to Verona with my bike, flew to Genoa with my bike, cycled to Verona, and got a flight from there back to Ireland. The rest of these lines here are kind of the sort of the extension of that campaign, you know. So if you wanted to, you could start back in France and you could finish up in Austria. And there's a notebook. I kept a notebook as I went along, taking note of places and places I'd seen, and the terrain, the distance covered, and things that I discovered along the way. So this brings me to so in 2004 I embarked on the second Italian campaign, which started in Geneva in Switzerland and again ended in Genoa. And what's interesting about this one is that it's the famous one that goes up over the Alps. So it went up through the Great St. Bernard Pass. And so that was the trail of the campaign in 1800. So having done them, I went onto Google Maps, and I picked out all the points that I felt were points of interest relating to these campaigns. So the blue markers there represent the campaign in the first one I did, and the green one there is the second one. And then I added in some extra other places. So I'm building up a kind of a database, if you like, of locations and the information that goes with them. So, sorry, I think I jumped one there. Yeah, okay. So this follows on then. The next one was in 2005. It was the 1805 campaign, which starts in Boulogne on the coast of France, opposite Dover and Calais. Dover, and it finished in near Brno in the Czech Republic. There's my trusty bike, and again in this led on to the campaign in the 1806 campaign, which I did in 2006. There was in 2007 I traveled from Warsaw in Poland to Kaunas in Lithuania. 1808 was the Spanish campaign. Spain and Portugal. 1809 was the Wagram campaign in Austria. We traveled from Munich to Vienna along the banks of the Danube, It was a very nice campaign because it was all downhill. And then 1812 was the Russian campaign. So I cycled from Kaunas to Moscow. And then 1813, 14, and 15. You can see in the middle there, there's the Leipzig campaign. This is the French campaign. And then the last one is this yellow one here, which is the Waterloo campaign. And I'll talk about that again there in a sec. And having kind of done all of this and sort of drawn it out, the idea occurred to me that there could be a possibility of creating one route that would kind of join them all together. So they're all different pieces of campaigns, but if you create the links, you can kind of create an overall route which would go from Lisbon in Portugal all the way up to Moscow in Russia. I call it the Grand Route. But anyway, so it's an idea of creating a network of routes through Europe, following in the footsteps or the traces of Napoleon. And you discover lots of things along the way. You discover monuments, and you discover museums and artifacts, and these are just some examples of the places in northern Italy, in Rivoli. This is part of a monument. The monument was actually built by the French, and it was destroyed by the Austrians, and then rebuilt by people more recently, French more recently. It originally had a column on it. This is just a small monument at Arcole, and this is Austerlitz in the Czech Republic. So in 2015, myself and my two brothers did this trip from the south of France to Brussels. It's the Waterloo campaign. So Napoleon was exiled. He was defeated, and he was exiled to the island of Elba, just off the coast of Italy. And he escaped from there, landed in the south of France, and he traveled up through the mountains all the way to Paris, where he took over again, to everyone's surprise. And then he ended up going north to Brussels. So Paris is here. Up to Brussels here, up to just outside Brussels, just south of Brussels at Waterloo is where he was defeated. So myself and my brothers Angus and Simon did this trip, and we raised a bit of money for charity, and we had great fun. And Simon coined the phrase VELOpoleon as a way of sort of encapsulating the cycling and the Napoleonic aspect of it. And we started a Facebook page just to sort of keep people informed. On the basis of that, I was contacted by an organization called the European Federation of Napoleonic Cities, who were interested in having cycling as part of their projects. And it's a Europe-wide federation of cities which all have something in common with Napoleon, or some sort of historical connection to Napoleon and the Napoleonic era. So one of their main projects is a project called Destination Napoleon, and that is an official cultural route of the Council of Europe. This is their cultural route called Destination Napoleon. So they couldn't use the term route Napoleon, because route Napoleon is a very specific route going from Cannes to Grenoble. So anyway, they called it Destination Napoleon. I've been in touch with them, and we've been trying to sort of tease out how we can sort of expand this idea into a kind of some sort of a a network, whether it's a website or an app or something, to try and kind of get people interested. This is to set up any kind of a network is quite a daunting task, but this is just a website that shows you all the different routes, cycle routes, kind of long distance cycle routes within Europe. So the idea is that we would piggyback on these to create a kind of a Napoleonic route, I suppose, cycle route. One of the most famous networks in Europe is called Eurovelo. There's 14 different routes traversing the whole continent. Eurovelo 1 is called the Atlantic Coast route, and that passes. It starts in the north of Norway, and it passes down along the Atlantic coast through Scotland, through Ireland, Britain, France, Portugal, and Spain. So it actually goes through Cork. So there you can see that EV1, it's called, Eurovelo 1, goes down through Cork and links up with, it ends at Rosslare, or, you know, it connects Rosslare and Larne in the north. Right. And more recently, this organization, this federation, has taken an interest in connecting Plymouth. Plymouth in the south coast of Britain is the most recent member, I think, of this federation, and because Napoleon was kept here for about 10 days on board a ship before he was transported to the South Atlantic, to St. Helena. So Eurovelo 1 is this yellow line here, connects these two, and there's a city over here, Pontivy, which this is Roscoff, and Pontivy is down here. Pontivy has Napoleonic connections. So the idea is to connect Plymouth and, I suppose, Pontivy and the rest of France via this Eurovelo route. And the idea has emerged to continue this Napoleonic type trip through Britain and onto Ireland. So I'm looking at the Irish leg of this at the moment. So this is just indicating different sites of Napoleonic interest, say between, say, Rosslare and Cork. You know, they're mostly British-built defense infrastructure, so Martello towers and fortresses and barracks and signal towers and so on. But there are other kind of non-military sites, some houses and places of burial of different people. Oops. And for example, this is Cork Harbour. Just there's a whole series of sites within the harbour, the Martello Towers, the forts, the gunpowder store and the battery. And down at the old head of Kinsale, there was, in 1822, there was a ship was returning from America to Liverpool, and it foundered on the rocks. There was a storm. It foundered on the rocks off the old head of Kinsale, and I think most people were drowned. But what's interesting was that there was 2 people on board who were drowned, and they had both fought in the Napoleonic Wars on either side, and they're buried at this little church here near Ballinspittle called Templetrine. The French general Lefebvre Desnouettes had had been to America, and he was returning to France actually in 1822, and he was drowned, and he's buried in this graveyard near Ballinspittle. And the Major William Gough had fought for the British in Spain, and Lefebvre Desnouettes had fought in Spain as well for the French. So they're both buried in this graveyard, and there's a move on to kind of create some sort of a proper memorial to Lefebvre Desnouettes. So thanks very much. That's it. There's just some links there if anybody is interested, and those are my contact details, and we have Facebook and a Twitter page. So that's it. Thanks very much.
Adam, thanks so much. I wondered if there was anyone had any questions to start with. We probably have sort of 5 minutes to kind of get you through things. Just going to look in the chat and see what is there.
While you're doing that, I'm kind of curious, Adam, why, I suppose why, what drove you to, is it just your interest in history, or is there some link to your background as an architect? And do you think architecturally, or I suppose not architecturally, but has this endeavor informed how you think in an architectural sense?
I think it does. I suppose any architect looking at any landscape wants to begin to try and understand it a bit, maybe. And I think if you see something like a remnant of I don't know, a wall or a fortification or a road, you want to kind of try and make sense of it. And I think, by looking at the broader picture, you can kind of piece together things. And I suppose, a curiosity about these things, and I suppose it's quite visual, really. It goes from the scale of the the small tower to the coastline to a kind of a regional kind of a thing, and it's trans-European, and that's kind of part of the interest, I suppose, is that you can go nearly anywhere and you start finding things like my wife is always complaining that everywhere we go on holidays, I seem to kind of find out the local Napoleonic thing, and anyway, it's fine. But
yeah, because I think it does remind me in that sense of Alison Smithson's journey that she kind of encoded in her wonderful book, which was AS in a DS. So the DS being the Citroen DS, the famous Citroen DS, and the book in itself then is the sort of shape of the car, the kind of plan shape of the car. So that question, I suppose, about that Steph just asked. I suppose is it the alertness, Adam, that you think that an architect kind of brings then to these sites that kind of is maybe more than somebody in the, a historian might bring, for example, or maybe it's not it's significantly different in a way, that you're looking at other things that kind of both the kind of space of these places and the kind of configuration of them as interlinked zones.
I don't want to, kind of put down historians, and their wealth of knowledge, but I suppose, everybody has something to bring to the table, and yeah, I suppose, there's a certain, I suppose I'm thinking in terms of military architecture, I suppose. There's a certain kind of aesthetic to it, or a certain kind of practicality to it. But what's also interesting, I think, is that because all of these things have become obsolete, you begin to look at them maybe in other ways of looking for the possibilities, and going to visit them by bike is one of those possibilities, but maybe there's other ways, there's other uses, or I don't know, ways of interpreting them as well.
Yeah, I mean, it did occur to me, think about Paul Virilio's book, Politics and Speed, about the movement over ground, how that transformed wars, and your movement when you said you went downhill from one site to another. It does start to talk about, of course, the imperative to move quickly in wars of that nature. And you start to kind of think about the landscape in very different ways, because I think that's that's kind of evidenced, I suppose, in the fact that a number of them are kind of killing zones. So the one in Cork Harbour actually has an interlocking kill zone, the way the guns are kind of triangulated across from sort of Spike Island and things like that. So the idea of kind of targeting and crossfire is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like another layer of I suppose there's two different aspects to the Napoleonic era or traces. There's the military aspect, and then there's a kind of a kind of a civilian aspect, I suppose. And it's hard to see them, but I think with a little bit of guidance in that, people would get a lot more out of things if there was I don't know, more publicity or websites or apps or whatever, so it kind of connects things for people.
So Adam, lots of compliments in the chat. I'm just going to maybe mention some of the questions kind of quickly before we move on.
Sure.
But somebody asks, Marie Cooney, Adam, on average, how many miles a day were you covering?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't have an average. I have. I mean, I don't know what the least I did in a day. I mean, the least was probably, I don't know, probably 50 kilometers or something like that. Because it might have been my end point for that day, and I was already close to it, so I didn't have to do much. The most I did in any one day, it was over 211 kilometers or something like that. I didn't really plan it that way, but that's the way it turned out. Yes. I was cycling through Russia, and trying to find a place to stay in Russia is difficult enough. But I had planned to stay in a certain place, and it turned out it didn't exist, or it wasn't available to foreigners or whatever. So I had to go on to the next place, and it was getting dark, and I just had to go for it, really, But I don't have an average per day.
That's okay. Colin Ryder has asked, Adam, intriguing links to Napoleon, especially on the Irish side of things. Is there any more links to the Irish activities that you're aware of?
I know there's a Napoleon Society of Ireland who are involved in the international scene, and I think they probably would have a lot more information than I would on a lot of those kind of Napoleonic connections in Ireland. I mean, I suppose with a bit of research in that, you could probably find out quite a lot. The International Napoleonic Society are going to have their annual conference, or their annual congress in Cork in 2022. So that'll be interesting. But it is, yeah, I mean, it is hard to find things, because I suppose it's the Napoleonic infrastructure here in Ireland, or it's a kind of a British heritage which has been sort of not totally obliterated, but is sort of glossed over, and so it takes a bit of digging, I suppose, to find things. But there must be plenty of stories there, you know, because they say at one stage there was almost half the British Army was Irish, and of course Wellington was born in Ireland. So there are definitely things.
Wellington famously, he was born in Portarlington, County Laois, Adam, but he famously said being born in a stable doesn't make you a horse.
I know.
And asked about his Irish heritage.
I know.
Neve Hurley, Adam, has said, would you be interested in developing a set cycle route that would link to the historic areas of Cork that also deals with the level changes here?
Yeah, I've done a few tours in and around Cork, yeah, I think I know places to go and see. One of the problems of the harbour is that the sites are spread out, and to get from one to the other, unless you have a boat, it can be quite a roundabout trip. But there's this whole idea of this. Of a riverside route, cycle route that would go from, say, Ballincollig all the way out to the sea out in Crosshaven, the lead to sea idea. And I think that could probably pick up on some of those places as well. But I think it could be, you could have maybe a website or something with some of those routes. And it would kind of inform people. I think people like to follow a route. They like to go from one place to another, and they like to be kind of shown how to do that and discover things themselves along the way. And I also think, like, from that people taking holidays, I think they like to have that extra dimension and not just be, I don't know, sitting on a beach all day,
Livia, who presented on Monday, there's a note of congratulations. Great stuff, Adam. Thank you, she says. And then
thanks, Livia.
Check out Elba. She said it's a Napoleonic and cycling mecca. You know this?
Yeah, I've never been, but I hear it's great. Yeah.
And two last quick things. But Nuala, who's going to be talking next week, Nuala says the Napoleonic Wars are very relevant to the economy of Cork at the time in terms of food supply, she says. So great to see the connections and things to Europe being made in that regard. Finally, Chris. Chris is wondering how your pugilist skills stood up to all this cycling, Adam. So he said, did Adam engage in fighting, skirmishes, or any battles of note during his campaign?
I don't think I had to fight anyone. I had to outrun a pack of wild dogs in Egypt. I don't know if that counts. No, it's been...
Call that a skirmish.
Yeah. I've never really... thank God I've never had any problems, and there never any battles.
Adam, thank you so much. We might come back later if anyone has any last questions I haven't put in the chat just yet. And we might ask Laura and James just to take over the screen. As they do, I might just say a little bit about their own presentation, which is that they've been thinking about the impact through the COVID-19 pandemic and how the traditional collaborative processes, design processes, were distorted, I suppose, by the health pandemic. So they'll be looking at and talking about the evaluation and the construction of a project in the Blackrock Observatory that we see coming up onto the screen, also in Cork Harbour. So a nice connection, nice segue there. Laura or James, whoever put up that image, and just in time. So thank you. So whenever you're ready, Laura and James, you can kick on.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you.
My name is Laura, and I've just finished my studies in Cork Centre for Architectural Education. And James as well is in 4th year. So this project started off as an internship for 3rd and 4th year students in CCAE. So we had to submit an application and go through Zoom interviews, and this was kind of just at the time where we were starting to move our lives online and not meeting in person. So even from the start of this project, it was definitely Zoom based, a lot of Zoom, a lot of Microsoft Teams. So the project was a collaboration between Blackrock Observatory and Design Pop. So Design Pop is a food and design festival based in Cork, and they had teamed up with CIT and Sarah, Maroon and Aoife from CCAE to provide us the opportunity to create a pavilion. James, do you want to?
I'll move on.
Yeah.
So we started in the middle of COVID. We're still in the middle of COVID, but we had to find then ways to, communicate and kind of like design from start to finish throughout this project. So we had one meeting in the BCO, and we're all in the courtyard, we're all spaced out 2 meters. There was about 10 of us there with the clients. There was us and our lecturers there as well. And we just kind of had a run through of how we're going to kind of approach this and the kind of what we're going to have to do to build a pavilion in this kind of climate. And so the kind of conversations were, it can't be like a pavilion where you kind of enter and you can touch things. It had to be kind of an extroverted pavilion where it's more of a kind of display piece, or you don't exactly there's no hands-on touching the pavilion. So we started our design process, and Maroon, he's kind of a master of programs, and he told us about this program called Miro, and it's kind of like a digital whiteboard. And as you can see, we we have this long timeline of how the process all along developed. I'll move on. This is more kind of a
I
zoom
think
in.
when we started the project, we hadn't even really thought about the implications of COVID. We were just thinking, okay, we're going to do a pavilion. But then when we got to that first meeting in BCO, we realized there are going to be design implications. Like, we'd had some kind of rough ideas of where we maybe wanted to go, but then we had to have these discussions about how are we going to make this safe? How are we going to make this viable in this time? Because it was kind of just about the period where we had to start like wearing masks and making sure to social distance. So it was all kind of new to us. So it was a bit of a shock, but it was definitely a massive driver for the project in the end.
As well, one of our main kind of problems with the design process was children, because it was going to be outside. The BCO staff said, you've got to design something that children aren't going to climb, or they want to climb. They said they have absolutely no control. So I'll move on here. This is a concept model Laura made. This was kind of, we would say midway through kind of our
it was
process?
midway through. Like, we kind of started just doing kind of sketch designs, and then this is kind of when we arrived at where we were going. But we had to do a lot of little videos like this, and like you can do sketches and videos and all sorts of multimedia in Miro. So because we couldn't be working right next to each other, we had to communicate somehow to kind of illustrate what we wanted to show, despite not being able to meet up for a lot of the project.
We still made a lot of physical models.
Yeah.
And I'll move on again. So then once we kind of narrowed in on an idea that we kind of wanted to push ahead on, we were allowed access into the CCAE workshop, and here we could kind of test and experiment with different materials and kind of figure out how we're going to build this thing, which was a first for us really, because in college we very much design orientated but never actually practically building anything. So this was kind of maybe a big culture shock for us at first. Not only that we had to kind of socially distance, as you can see on the ground there's lines that we had to stay inside, and if we took out tools, we were only allowed to touch those tools ourselves. We couldn't share them. But like going in from like a non-practical sense, the the building process is a lot longer than we thought. You know, we thought we could just finish say that box alone there on the right hand side. That probably took what 2 hours, 3 hours to make. We thought we could knock these out in 10 minutes. So
yeah, but I think what really helped us in this stage in the workshop was kind of coming up with the strategies how we would be safe. Aoife was very involved in that, just making sure that we had separate toolboxes, that everyone was assigned a role. So one person would be touching the laser cutter, the other person would be touching the computer, and just making a really clear strategy to make sure we weren't cross-contaminating, which is quite hard when you're trying to construct something like pass me the screwdriver, but you're having to have second thoughts and be like, no, I need to do this safely and try not to be passing things around, which is actually quite difficult.
We had a load of help during the whole process. So we had an engineer from CIT called Kieran Rowan. He helped us with the kind of logistics of building the pavilion. We also had Sarah, who you see in the center of the screen. She was the workhorse behind the scene. She I don't think she stopped for the 2 months we made this. If she wasn't running to the shop and then running to collect her children, running back to go and collect more paint, she was incredible. We also had Maroon and Aoife Brown, who were absolutely invaluable as well. They were also workhorses. Actually, you know, I can't put this on Sarah. The three of them, they were incredible. The amount of commitment they put in as well, extraordinary. Oh, do you want to say something there, Laura? Sorry.
Oh no, I mean, it was just, yeah, no, I think we can move on. I'm fine. So another aspect of the project that was quite collaborative was getting all of the exhibition pieces for the pavilion together. So the pavilion had all of these individual modular cubes, and then each one was filled with a drawing, a model, an artwork. So we put out a call for creators on the Design Pop Instagram and reached out to students in CCAE as well. So that aspect was quite collaborative as well. We had a lot of different people helped us out and put their work into the pavilion for us, which was great as well. The project as a whole was definitely incredibly collaborative. Like myself and James couldn't have done it without everyone that was helping us.
So when it came to building the pavilion, we were in luck because the girl who runs Design Pop had a contact on the harbour who had a warehouse which was 80,000 square feet, and they said, yeah, we could use the back of it, you know, rent free. So we set out with a load of dust sheets, set them all out. Everyone had their own dust sheet. We laid out each part that we were preparing, and everyone just worked on. So we had not only did we call out for creators, we called out for people to come and help us build this along the way. So you can see down there we even had children helping us out.
The warehouse is definitely an invaluable space because it was kind of the first time we could kind of have enough space to all be apart and safe, but still able to work together. And it was just kind of about this point when we were in the warehouse that the festival got cancelled, unfortunately. So then we had to adapt and overcome. So we were able to reconfigure the pavilion because it was so modular in its design. And Blackrock Castle were amazing and gave us a space in the castle itself to set up the pavilion as an exhibition space. So this is the reconfigured design. And do you want to talk about the instruction manual, James?
So we realized that we're gonna make this thing inside the BCO, which will be kind of a semi-permanent exhibit. But the idea, or maybe one of the driving forces of the project was this kind of reusability and, you know, the afterlife of the project. You know, there's no point designing this thing for 3 months and then it gets kind of trucked away. So we made an instruction manual to kind of, if it is going to be disassembled, it can be built again and someone else other than us can build it. So we marked every part of the frame and the modules, and we kind of made this almost like an IKEA manual to build it up again. which actually helped us in the process of building the frame itself, because the manual actually worked quite well. You know, it really did help. Oh, you gonna say something?
No,
I thought you were saying something. Sorry.
Sorry, James. Zoom is hard. So these are some of the images of the pavilion completed within Blackrock Castle. It features some of the artworks from our collaborators there, as well as some sculptures and drawings and models. So it was really nice to have multidisciplinary exhibits for the pavilions. They were all kind of furthering Blackrock Castle's message of getting people involved in science and astronomy.
Yeah, so we had, when we called out for creators, we got a load of CCAE students, and we got a few artists from around town. We got mums, we got dads, we got a few children to make some parts as well. So they're all now housed inside these exhibits in the BCO.
Thanks so much, Laura, James. That's really great. I put a question in the chat, which is any questions from anyone, but I might just kind of kick that off by, I don't know whether it's an observation or maybe a question, but I'm going to pose it as a question. I suppose I've got a couple of interrelated things that come to mind. I suppose one is the skills that you're talking about. James, you mentioned it in terms of the idea of moving between sort of modes of creating, which were to do with both communicating, you know, across to a client and to one another as creatives, and elsewhere. So I was kind of wondering then, in the last 9 months, has your view on the modalities that an architect might work in, and the imperative to work in a kind of multimodal way, physically, digitally, even through other immersive technologies, has that changed from, for example, 12 months ago?
I think it has, well, especially being in college now. Like last year, you know, it was essentially model making and maybe, you know, CAD drawings. And this year now we've been pushing other 3D softwares. We've been using Miro. As a class, we've been using Miro boards, so like digital whiteboards. We've also done a lot of, obviously, online lectures. So there's a few other programs as well. We've kind of introduced all new kind of ways of communicating in this time where we can't be physically communicating ourselves. And to be honest, it's benefited us as well. I think, I don't know, for us, maybe the online lectures have really helped. Because a lot of people then will say they live outside of town, you know, they're coming in, it's 45 minutes for them to come in for maybe 2 hours, come back home again, which don't know 45 minutes. They've lost, you know, almost 2 hours of a day. So I think it really has helped. Well, saying that, yeah. The times are bad, but the way we've adapted is really good, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of said that architects, I've always found architecture students incredibly sort of resilient and capable of moving into new fields quite quickly. In fact, and I think you're kind of demonstrating that. I suppose the other area that I kind of, and in terms of the sort of the shifting perception maybe of the traditional activities of an architect, maybe you'd talk about your own interests in the idea of, I mean, this is part of a sort of festival, yeah? So maybe what I'm wondering is how architecture, in your mind, can either engage with or activate public and social spaces in new ways. What's your view on that?
I mean, I feel like I think that was really the aim of this project. It's definitely, architecture definitely has a massive role in that. It is a pity that we didn't get to see kind of how it played out in real life and see people interacting with the pavilion. It still hasn't been open to the public, but hopefully one day we will see.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be great to see it, and maybe that kind of segues nicely into Nula's question, which is the value of the the study thus far. So Nuala observes that already it's something that's been achieved against all the odds and involved high levels of innovation in the creative and working processes. So she was kind of wondering whether an instruction manual, so not necessarily the fabrication manual, the IKEA fabrication manual, but kind of a guidance manual on working collaboratively during a pandemic. And maybe could that be a blog? Could that be something else? So, which would start to kind of instruct people on ways of working together at distance. Is that something you would take on?
I think that'd be really beneficial. And I know it's kind of a lot of pessimism around, but you still can achieve these projects as well. I don't think at any time, COVID was always on our minds, but it never stopped us. We never halted anything, other than when the festivals cancelled. We had to just adapt our designs. So yeah, I think a manual to help people maybe process in this time has been very kind of beneficial.
Yeah, one of my that could be a digital manual, of course. Or
a digital manual, yeah, no, physical manuals won't be a good call, I don't think. But
then Aoife Brown has asked you a question. So, due to your research with the BCO Blackrock Castle Observatory scientist, are you now inspired to work with broader universal concepts?
I think.
Are you taking this, Laura?
I don't mind. I think we definitely learned a lot. Even just being in Blackrock Castle, putting up the pavilion, the amount of conversations we had with the staff who are also amazingly passionate about science. They definitely got me thinking about things I hadn't thought about. And we learned so much from them. So it's definitely kind of inspired me to kind of look into these things and kind of, yeah, it was great to do a project that's inspired by something that we wouldn't normally work with as architects necessarily. It was really interesting. I would definitely do it again if possible.
So what we designed was kind of outer space themed. So that kind of then created this conversation about modularity and reusability, and kind of this idea of, say, spaceships have to be incredibly efficient with how they deliver materials into space. There can't be any added waste. So all the modules we made collapsed to take up the smallest amount of space possible. So the whole frame and the whole modules only take up a space of about, was it 2 meters by maybe a meter floor space? It's incredible. When it's built, then it's a massive frame, a massive structure. So
I think the way of thinking about space and going into space definitely filtered down into our design a lot.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I've had at least one master's graduate apply to the European Space Agency for a position there. I don't know if there's anyone from UL here, but I know a number of years ago, about 4 years ago, one of the graduates there, I think, got some funding after doing their 5th year to go and explore further, their own research further, and on a kind of Star Trek kind of way, go further into space. But the research the idea of space and the viability of forming structures in extra or outer terrestrial areas. So it is kind of interesting. Again, I think it's an expansion of the areas in which I think that's what we seem to be repeating or going back to, the broadening of the landscape that architects kind of work in. So that's really interesting. And I think, again, that is maybe something that is observed in the chat here. So Caroline has observed that those aspects, but she's also yeah, so her question really is the idea of learning by making or learning by doing. So she's asked the question, what are the main benefits of doing the project leading to building the end product? Maybe what are the main benefits, but also what are the challenges, of course, in that?
It's maybe this is maybe an obvious thing to say, but when we're designing something, we had in the back of our mind that we actually have to build this as well. So we couldn't design something that we weren't going to build. So it kind of gave us a sense of reality, I suppose, like in the fact that, you know, when you design something, it has to be built. So I don't know, that helped. And as well, this it's our kind of first time dealing with a budget as well. So whatever we designed had to be something that could be paid for, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think as well, when through the process of designing and buying all the materials, it wasn't the main bulk that was the expense. It was all the fixtures and fittings and all the kind of little bits and bobs that actually added up to the most amount of money. And that kind of, I think that was a kind of a lesson to us that, you know, just because something's big, bulky, it's generally cheaper because it's big and bulky, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. It was definitely something I'd never encountered before, having to actually build it, but it was just very much a realization that these little tiny design decisions, like we'll put 3 staples there, we'll put 2 staples there, have massive consequences when you have to do it at a larger scale and you have to construct 100 of these boxes. That, you know, even the cost of buying all the extra staples, it just makes you think more and be more thoughtful when you're designing, because you know directly the consequences that will happen through your decisions, I think.
Yeah, every material as well had like a different consequence. There was kind of like pros and cons for everything, and it was juggling between which material would work best for this, which would work best for this. And we did a few kind of last minute kind of changes. Like at the start, we were big into Velcro. It was like, for us, it was like a wonder material. We were using it for everything, and maybe about 2 weeks later, then all our Velcro started failing. So it was like, no, Velcro's out the window now. We've got to find a new way to kind of secure stuff. Yeah.
And having the opportunity to test it 1-to-1 was very different as well, because we could put weights in it, leave it overnight, and see if it actually would stay together. And often it didn't. So that was a learning experience too.
I suppose that brings me on to another question, a couple of questions that are flying into the chat all of a sudden. Caroline has reverted and asked, what would you do differently the next time based on these reflections that you're currently sharing with us?
That's a tough one. I think we'd work maybe a bit more efficiently next time. Now that we kind of have an understanding of certain materials, like we wanted to, I don't know, our painting anyway. We thought the painting would take 2 days. It took us 2 weeks to paint. So that's something we'll definitely. That was a huge learning curve. You know, we had these unrealistic targets we kind of gave ourselves. We were like, oh, this will only take 2 days, so that's fine. Then we can do this. Then on the 3rd day. 2 weeks later, then we can move on to the next one. And this is with like 10 or 20 helpers as well. So yeah, painting definitely is something that I think it requires more time, because the way we were painting anyway, we had to paint one side, it had to dry, flip it over, paint the other side, had to dry, then again. So a constant process.
I think we did the best we could with the knowledge that we had, but I think now with retrospect, we'd probably do a lot of things differently.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, I once saw a documentary on Google X, and they go through, 8 versions of, something, testing out really kind of small things in terms of kind of proof of concept. It's never as significant as kind of getting, I mean, I think that's always a difficulty with architecture. Traditionally you're always innovating again, no matter how similar a project looks. Whereas in terms of other disciplines, or if you take manufacturing, they can perfect the prototype. They can make several prototypes with buildings. You kind of traditionally get one chance, and you extend learnings from that. And maybe there are some other questions, maybe in terms of the space of architectural kind of thinking and roles. So Nuala has asked, did the project change your views of the architect's role as a communicator, which is an excellent question. The ability, the necessity to communicate.
Oh, sorry. It definitely did. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just naivety, but I didn't realize, the amount of or how much of the role we were taking up as such, because we saw it from, say, start to finish. And, if we didn't communicate our ideas, or if we didn't communicate our intentions, then it wouldn't have been done. That's kind of that's the kind of first time I think that kind of dawned on us, that kind of aspect of maybe what an architect's role is, and how clear you have to be about things as well. You can't just say, oh, we need a 24 bolts or nuts and bolts. What size, what depth, what type of thread, how much can they hold? It did come down to with the way we hung these boxes. We used these I think they're mirror hooks, or I don't know what they called. They're hanging
hooks or something. Yeah.
But the diameter of the mirror hook was the wire that held up the hook had to be fit the same diameter or lower to fit in, and we couldn't find the wire then until we went to Brownlow's, and then Brownlow's had wire which had this rubber wrapping on, so we were worried it wouldn't fit, and there was kind of this chain of effects because of the diameter changes, and that was really interesting though.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Steph has.
I might just ask them myself. I'm curious.
That's a better idea.
Yeah, I'm curious about the way you were talking about that there hasn't been interaction with the pavilion yet because it hasn't been open to the public. But I think, in a way, there has already been interaction with it in how you had people working with you to construct it in this big warehouse space. And I was kind of thinking, is that maybe the point of this project? Obviously, because it can't be an exhibition given the nature of COVID, but you could have people working together in this big space. And for 2 weeks as well, you were saying with the painting, I think almost there would have been something lost if it took less time to paint because people were actually able to interact with it during this time. So I wonder, I don't know, that's more of an observation than a question, but.
No, I agree. I agree. It was the whole process was, it was great fun, and it was great to have, especially in this time now where you don't necessarily get to meet people or do projects with people anymore, and it was really nice. Especially friends as well. We'd all come from different counties before this project, and then some friends from Cork or whatever, they'd all meet up. This would be the first time they meet up during summer, so there definitely was an aspect of that, where the process was as enjoyable as the exhibition in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And the warehouse was such a hub for meeting people. There was a lot of artists would be wandering through, and there was one fella who came painting for a couple of hours in the morning. There was just lots of random people kind of showing up, and people you hadn't seen in a while, and they just be, I'm here to paint, which was lovely.
We had strangers come up, and they wanted to help as well. They didn't even know what we were doing in there. They just wanted to help. So
the gate would be open, someone would look in, they'd have a wander in, we'd tell them about the project.